phantoms of a world gone by speak again their immortal tale. What was it?
All right, then. What was it?
What was it? Nobody knows. But the house was haunted by something or somebody. The boarders here at Mrs. Dimity's boarding house didn't believe in ghosts either, myself included. But we were curious about them. That's why we voted to move into the old brownstone house on 49th Street. And once we were in, we were still convinced that ghosts don't venture abroad in a New York tenement building. The only one who wasn't quite convinced that ghosts exist only in storybooks was old Mrs. Dimity herself. But her favorite roomer, young, handsome Ned Saunders, and myself, I'm Dr. Hammond, we refused to believe the ghostly nonsense. Anne Mitchell, the young sculptress who lived there, was frankly curious, while the Countess Harkavy, a fortune-teller of some renown and a psychic of questionable fame, was delighted at the idea of living in a haunted house. That was in a business way, of course. It was around 11 o'clock at night when the boarders, who were then assembled in that dark, dreary living room, first heard what some claimed was a ghostly presence.
Listen to that, Dr. Hammond.
I hear it, Ned. It's an uncommon sort of sound for the wind.
That is not the wind, Dr. Hammond. It is the cries from the spirit world. I feel it in the marrow of my bones.
Oh, say, Countess, can't you feel things in a more comfortable place? Bone structures always struck me as a most uncomfortable place to have a feeling going on.
Listen, all of you. Listen.
Oh, skip it. Ned, will you pass me that magazine on the shelf next to you? I think any kind of reading will be preferable to listening to old psychic ears rambling.
Sure thing. Here you are, dear.
You really think this house is haunted, Countess?
Yes, I do.
It would be a fortunate thing for your business if the United States of America could be made ghost-conscious.
Dr. Hammond, you'll live to regret that remark. The Countess will take you seriously.
I am serious.
And talking of taking things seriously, when are you going to start taking me seriously, Anne?
When you start to make a living, Ned. Oh, someday I hope I won't have to try and sell my sculptures.
All art is conceived out of the fires of struggle.
Well, I'm tired of struggling. Oh, if I could just create something out of the ordinary for an art exhibit, I could make a couple of $100. I've been working 3 months for an idea, and I haven't done a thing.
My poor dear Anne, as long as you doubt the extraordinary, how can you create it?
She's got you there, Anne.
Yes, she has, Dr. Hammond.
Well, what would you suggest as a good subject for Anne to sculpt, Countess?
Well, a denizen of the other world, perhaps?
Oh, sure. That's rather a hot place for a girl to venture in order to sculpt the devil, isn't it?
Don't speak so lightly of his satanic highness. No one knows where the devil's hand may be next.
How about sculpting me, Anne? I'm an extraordinary young man.
That you are, darling.
Extraordinarily broke, at any rate.
Oh, the woes of the world revolve on that ugly stuff called money.
People take money much too seriously, Ned.
Well, frankly, Dr. Hammond, if I had some of it, I wouldn't take it at all seriously. I'd scatter it around the world like a veritable windmill.
Oh, frivolity. That's your trouble, my dear friends. Frivolity. You feed on it. Here in this very house is a poor, earthbound spirit, and yet you ignore it.
Come, Countess, you don't expect us to take it seriously?
I expect nothing.
What do you expect us to do? Call the spirit in and ask him to sit for me?
Possibly, Anne. Possibly.
Come, Countess, you're joking.
I have never been more serious in my life. I think we ought to hold a seance and command the spirits to enter the room.
That would be interesting, at least scientifically so.
Oh, nonsense, Doctor. Besides, Mrs. Dimity'd never stand for it. Ever since she moved us into this house, she's been scared stiff of the very idea of spirits.
Have you seen the amulet she's been wearing?
Yes. She carries it around like a sword.
Why don't we ask her?
Oh, we were just talking about you, Mrs. Dimity.
Oh, dear. I tell you, I just can't stand being alone in my room. I just know something was in there with me, Anne. I just know it.
The spirits probably have been attracted to you, Mrs. Dimity. I've always felt you're strongly psychic.
Oh, don't say it, Countess. Don't even think about it. It was all a mistake, moving into this house. All a mistake. I've just never been as nervous. Dr. Hammond, feel my pulse. Feel it. It's practically non-pulse, so to speak.
Well, I wouldn't take it seriously, Mrs. Dimity. We all know there are no such things as spirits. You see, we've been talking about the ghost for so long that at times we half believe, but that's purely imagination.
It wasn't imagination at all, Dr. Hammond. You know very well there are only 5 of us living here. You 4 were downstairs, and I was alone upstairs, and, I did hear footsteps in the hall. I opened the door, and I felt something cold touch me.
Ah, you see, I knew it.
Oh, listen. Oh, it came from upstairs. Listen, all of you.
Ah, and was that also the wind, Dr. Hammond?
I don't know, Countess. What do you think, Ned?
I think the Countess' idea of a seance is a good practical suggestion. I'm all for it.
A seance? Oh, dear.
Yes, let's give it a try.
Well, we're all agreed.
Yes, come on, Les. I think it's a good
You're
idea.
in charge, Countess. Now tell us what to do.
Well, now, for the first thing, bring your chairs into a circle, please.
Oh, dear. I think I want to find this show.
Now, hold hands. Will someone turn off the lights?
I'll get the switch.
Good. Now we're in the dark. Quiet, please. Quiet while I summon the spirits. It is midnight, O spirits, midnight. Enter the portals of our room and speak to us. Speak to us. We are gathered to commune with you who have passed on. Withhold not your secrets. Speak. Speak. It is I, Countess Harkavy, asking you to descend to this mortal plane. Answer me. Answer me.
If my Uncle Ezekiel's in the room and wants to talk to me, I'd talk to him, Countess.
Yes, Mrs. Dimity.
Ned, stop squeezing my hand.
I'm not squeezing your hand, Anne.
Or whatever you're doing, stop doing
I'm not doing
it.
anything.
Ouch, doggone it.
What's the matter with you, Anne?
You're so coy, pinching me now.
I'm not pinching you. My hands are in my lap.
Well, who's ever sitting next to me? Stop it. Dr. Hammond.
I'm sitting across from you, Anne.
Mrs. Dimity.
Oh, dear. I wouldn't have the courage to squeeze anybody's hand at this point.
Ouch. Well, whoever it is, turn on the light, somebody. Turn on the light.
No.
Somebody's got hold of my
No,
hand.
don't turn on the lights. The spirits have entered the room and are attracted to you, Anne. To you.
Oh, please turn on the lights, please.
I'll do it, Anne. I'll do it.
Oh, let go. Oh, there. Who?
There's nobody sitting next to you. That's a vacant chair.
But I felt it.
Anne, did you imagine it?
Imagine what? That somebody squeezed my hand? I imagine nothing. Look at my hand. And tell me that's imagination.
What's it, darling? What? Dr. Hammond, look. Her hand is bruised.
Yes, it is. Pretty badly bruised. Countess, where were you sitting?
Exactly where I'm sitting now, Dr. Hammond, and I haven't moved. You had your chance to do something extraordinary, Anne, but you muffed it. A pity is all I can say. A great pity. The seance is ruined.
But, Countess, wait a minute.
What for? To try another seance and have you become hysterical all over again? Good night.
Dr. Hammond, is it possible that I really was holding the hand of something, or...
Anything's possible, Anne, but not very probable.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear.
I said not very probable, Mrs. Dimity. I think perhaps the Countess has been playing a trick on all of us.
It's a cute trick, Doctor. A pretty difficult one.
If she wasn't playing a trick, she shouldn't have been so upset when you turned on the lights, Ned.
Oh, Doctor, I think you've got a point there.
Nothing like a good dash of logic to take the cold chills out of my spine.
Well, how could the Countess do it, Doctor?
Well, Mrs. Dimity, psychic phenomena is the Countess's business. After all, she makes a living out of calling imaginary spooks from the outer world. I don't think it's very nice of us to try and pry into her secrets.
I hope you're right, Doctor. I do hope you're right.
Well, I wouldn't worry, Mrs. Dimity.
Well, I'm going upstairs to bed. I've had enough spooks to last me for years.
Oh, wait for me, Mrs. Dimity. I'll go up with you. Good night, Ned.
Good night, Anne.
Good night, Dr. Hammond. See you in the morning.
Good night, my dear. And don't worry about the spooks. They're purely harmless make-believe.
Oh, dear. I'll never sleep a wink, Anne.
Well, Doctor, what's the tongue-in-the-cheek look?
Oh. Ned, I'm afraid we've had our first touch of real psychic phenomena tonight.
But you just said
I
that...
didn't want to frighten the women.
And you believe this house is haunted?
Haunted? Well, I don't like the phrase, but in essence, that's the idea. I was wondering if you'd be interested in trying an experiment with me tonight.
Certainly, Doctor, anything.
But suppose you and I spend the next few nights down here. We'll turn off the lights and wait. Just wait. Perhaps we can invite some trouble. We waited that night through without sleeping, but nothing extraordinary happened, except for the fact that Mrs. Dimity's rocking chair kept rocking all night long, creaking and squeaking as it moved. But the wind could have been responsible for that. The next night and the next and the one after that, we kept our nightly vigil, creeping up to our rooms like thieves just before daylight broke, so that nobody would suspect our secret experiment. On the fifth night of our wait, we heard the rocking chair creaking, creaking, creaking.
Doctor.
Yes, Ned?
That rocking chair couldn't be moved by wind tonight. There isn't a breath of air stirring.
I noticed that, Ned. I wonder...
Listen.
Yes, the creaking stopped. Same as usual. I'll try to get some sleep.
I can't. I'm as nervous as a cat over this whole thing.
Yes, I'm jittery, too.
Ouch, let me...
What's the matter, Ned?
I don't know. Somebody's attacked me. Help me, Doctor.
Yeah.
Help me. It's got its arms around my throat.
There, I feel it. We'll find out who this ghost is in a short time. There, I've got his arms, Ned.
My throat. Let go of my throat. There. It's hurt. Can you hang on to him alone, Doctor?
I think so, but he's as strong as an ox. No, you don't.
Listen to him, will you, Doctor? His voice certainly doesn't sound human.
Turn on the lights, Ned, while I hang on to him. We'll find out who this practical prankster is.
I'm afraid to let him go, Doctor.
I can handle him, Ned. You turn on the lights. Hurry, Ned, hurry.
All right, of course. There you are. No, wait. No. Doctor, where is he?
He's right in front. I've got him by the arms. I'm hanging on to it. Now, this is amazing.
Amazing, Doctor. Well, we can't see it. It's invisible.
Help me, Ned. He's trying to escape. Help! If I could only see him.
There we are. I've got it. I've got it. What is it, Doctor? What is this thing?
What was it? I didn't know as I held the grisly thing in my arms. It struggled and sobbed and moaned exactly as a beast would struggle and moan. An invisible beast. That was the horror of it. An invisible beast. I sent Ned to the basement of the old brownstone to get some stout rope. At least we could prevent this horror from escaping. That's what I thought then. Well, Ned returned shortly from the basement and opened the door.
Here you are, Dr. Hammond.
Oh, quickly, Ned. Bind its legs. I can't hang on to it much longer. Not as young as I used to be.
All right, Dr. Halmanic. Somehow I try to hold him on the floor.
Yes, of course. There you are, Ned. Now, quickly. Its feet are still for the minute.
There. I got the rope about them. Look.
Huh?
A perfect loop around nothing but empty air. Hold him and I'll bind the rope around him.
Oh, quickly, Ned.
There we are. That covers his feet. And I'll bring it up here and around his legs.
Here, give me the rope and I'll bind his hands.
All right. We're getting him bound up like an Egyptian mummy.
There, that does it. What a relief to be able to let that awful thing go.
All right, I'll take the rope now, Doctor, and bind it to this chair. He won't get away now, I'll guarantee that.
It isn't very large, is it?
No, about the size of a small boy.
Oh, but what is it?
Have you ever encountered anything like this before?
Well, frankly, Ned, never. Look at my hands, bitten and bruised. I wonder if I'll ever be able to move them again.
What are we going to do with the darn thing now?
I don't think that's our responsibility, Ned. I think we'd better call the boarders together and let them in on the secret.
Would you like me to get them, Doctor?
Yes, wake them up. But don't tell them why. Just ask them to come down here, and I'll throw this rug over the chair so that they won't see the ropes right away.
Don't ask so many questions, everybody. Dr. Hammond will explain everything.
Oh, good evening, Dr. Hammond. Have you possibly discovered that psychic phenomena does exist?
Come in, Countess. Come in, everybody. Don't be afraid, Mrs. Dimity.
What's that?
I'll explain it in a minute.
Explain it, Dr. Hammond?
Sit down, everybody, please. No, Mrs. Dimity, not in the rocking chair.
Oh, dear me.
I'm afraid we're in for a revelation this evening. Ned, please close the door.
Right.
Strange are the ways of the world.
Yes, Countess, the ways of the world are very strange. Mrs. Dimity, and the Countess has been correct about this house. There is something in it.
Oh, what do you mean?
There's nothing to be frightened of, Mrs. Dimity.
Oh, spirits are often kind. Indeed, they're friendlier than many mortals.
This isn't exactly a spirit, Countess.
What do you mean?
Exactly what I say. It's a beast of some kind.
Oh, the doctor, is it in this room?
Mrs. Dimity, please. Yes, Anne, it's in this room, in that rocking chair. I threw a rug over it.
Oh, unfortunate spirit.
If you wish, Countess, remove the rug.
Yes, of course.
Why, where is it?
It's there. You can see the ropes being held in place by it.
What kind of a hoax are you trying to play on me, Dr. Hammond?
It is not a hoax. There's a living, breathing something bound in that chair, but it's invisible.
Oh, why, that's incredible.
It's more than incredible.
Would you mind if I touched it?
I don't see why I should. It's not my beast. The problem is, what are we going to do with it? What do you suggest, Mrs. Dimity? Mrs. Dimity!
Oh, she's fainted, Dr. Hammond. I'll get a smelling salts right here in the desk drawer.
Oh, I felt it. I felt it, Anne. I felt it. A captured spirit. I must tell my co-worker, Dr. Zarkox, right away. He'll be so thrilled, so thrilled.
I'm not sure that we ought to tell anybody about it. Are you, Dr. Hammond?
Ned's quite right. We should not.
Oh, but Dr. Zarkox is the only living person constantly in touch with the spiritual night and day. Day and night, constantly.
The smelling salts should be in here someplace. Oh, here they are.
Until we find out exactly what it is, I don't think we ought to divulge the secret. Heaven knows what we've stumbled into.
You're right, Ned.
Here, Mrs. Dimity, take a deep breath of this.
And how do you propose going about finding out what it is?
Breathe deeply, Mrs. Dimity.
Well, I was thinking it might be possible for Anne to make a plaster cast of it.
Oh, that's a gay idea, Ned. Breathe deeply, Mrs. Dimity. You'll be all right.
That's quite a good idea, as a matter of fact.
No, you'll hold it while I make a cast, huh? If it happens to bite me with a pair of invisible teeth, that'll be my word.
No, being a doctor, I shall use a little chloroform and put it to sleep for a while. We'll be able to make a perfect cast.
Mrs. Dimity, are you all right?
Oh, I'll never be all right again.
Well, Anne, are you willing to give it a try?
Oh, I suppose so, Ned. I'll prepare the plaster right away.
There we are, Anne. The chloroform has worked perfectly. Whatever it is, it's asleep. Before you start with the plaster, I should like to listen to his heart with a stethoscope.
Certainly, Doctor.
Normal. A little faster than is normal for a human being, but maybe we're not dealing with a human being.
Yes, Doctor, that's very possible. Ned, would you hand me that container near you?
Certainly, Anne. Here you are.
Thanks, Ned. Well, Dr. Hammond, are you ready?
Yes, Anne, whenever you are.
We might as well start. 2:00. We ought to be through by 7.
And so Anne started to work to cover that invisible form with moist plaster. We watched her spellbound. The hideousness of the rough object which soon met our eyes was appalling. Anne's hands shook perceptibly as she forced herself to complete what she had started. Minutes changed into hours. The mold was completed, and we had a rough idea of this figure. Then Anne allowed the mold to dry. By morning, we had a rough facsimile of the invisible beast. How can I describe what it looked like? Well, it looked like nothing so much as a demon out of hell itself. Yes, shaped like a man with long, sinewy arms, but it was small, only 4 feet or so high. Its muscular development was amazing. And the face looked like a cannibal's, a demon. Cruel, tiny eyes, a tiny nose, and a twisted, a horribly long mouth, and sharp, shiny teeth. The first rays of light broke through the window, and I realized that the effects of the chloroform were wearing off. Watch out, ladies, awake.
I got him, Doctor. You better help me.
Yes, of course. Here, we'll hold him together. And
Yes, Dr. Hammond?
we'll hold him down, and you bind his legs with the cord.
Yeah. Get that rope around his legs. Good girl, Anne. That's it. Ow! He bit me.
Your arm, darling, it's bleeding.
Don't mind my arm. Just find the legs.
Okay.
Hurry up, Anne.
That's the girl. Now slip the rope around him and pull it good and tight.
All right. There we are. Give me the rope, Anne. I'll secure his arm.
Ned, look at your arm. Oh, Doctor, he's badly bitten.
Don't bother about me now, darling. We can't let this beast loose on humanity.
That face you've done, Ann, looks like the face of a man-eater.
Yeah, it does. Give me a hand, Dr. Hammond. We'll put it back in the chair and tie it.
Clean it now. 1, 2, lift.
There. Now, tie the darn thing there.
What do you think we ought to do with it now?
I don't know. You're the doctor. Well?
I think we all need some sleep. First, I'll tend to that arm of yours, Ned, and then we'll leave the thing here for a while.
Doctor, do you think we dare leave it here quite safely?
Well, judging from the way Ned's got it tied up, I think so. Not even a spirit could get out of those ropes. Come on, Ned. I want to take a look at that arm of yours.
Oh, I'm tired. I'll leave the little statue in here till morning. You know, Doctor, it makes an interesting study, doesn't it?
Yes, quite an interesting one. Extraordinary piece of work, one might say. Well, good night, Anne. Come on, Ned. Let's get that arm bandaged. We'll all think more clearly in the morning. We thought we could think more clearly after some sleep. And so the days went by. Ned and Anne and I stayed with that invisible beast constantly. I took test after test. Its heart condition, its breathing, every test I took baffled me completely. For this invisible beast reacted to every test exactly as a reptile would react. Or, to be more specific, a python, a type of snake which swallows an animal or a man whole and then digests it. As the days passed, we realized that since this was living matter, it must eat. We tempted it with every kind of food imaginable, tried force-feeding it, but the animal never swallowed one bite of food. And then one evening, all of us were collected in the living room when those horrible sounds started.
Oh, I tell you, Ned, it's hungry.
Ann, darling, we've tried feeding.
But you've got to get it out of this house. I can't take it any longer. Capturing a spirit will evoke the anger of the gods. My advice to you is to let it go.
That's not very good advice, Countess. Whatever this is, it would be fairly dangerous news.
Oh, isn't there anything we can feed it? It must be suffering horribly, Doctor. No food or water for 2 weeks.
Yes, Anne, there is something we can feed it, but unfortunately or fortunately, we can't.
What are you talking about, Doctor?
Human flesh, Ned. This creature is a man-eater, an invisible man-eater. There's only one thing for us to do. Call the police and the medical society and turn it over to them. There's nothing more we can do.
Oh, you'll regret this, Doctor. You'll regret it. You can't evoke the anger of the spirit world without payment in full.
Anne, will you make the call?
Certainly, Doctor.
I'll go with you, darling.
Don't tell them anything about it. Just ask them to come over here immediately. And so, gentlemen, Anne called you and brought you over here. I've told you the complete story of the monster from the very beginning.
Well, Dr. Hammond, as a member of the police force, I don't mean to doubt you. But where is this invisible monster?
It died of hunger 10 minutes before you arrived, Sergeant.
Well, where is it?
On the floor, here, next to my foot.
Huh?
You can feel it even if you can't see it. Here, put your hand down here.
All right. Sergeant, feel this. It feels like a dead man. I tell you it does. Look at that.
Sure, Doctor. What kind of a trick are you trying to play on it?
Trick, Sergeant? Take my word for it, it's no trick. You felt it yourself.
Many people know how to make a mass of material appear invisible. Chemistry can give you a lot of explanations of that kind of a hoax.
It's no hoax, gentlemen, on my word of honor. It's no hoax.
Tell us a better story. Come on, boys, let's get out of here.
Let's get out of here.
We enjoyed your fairy tale, Doctor, but we can't swallow that one
But,
whole.
gentlemen, ask any one of us in this room. I swear to you, it's the truth. Look in the corner at that statuette. That's an exact replica of the invisible beast.
Now I get it. You're trying to get some free publicity for the art exhibition at the museum.
No, gentlemen. I made that plaster cast myself from the invisible monster. Dr. Hammond's telling you the truth.
Yeah? Well, if it's the truth, what was it?
What was it? Frankly, gentlemen, I don't know what it was.
From the time-worn pages of the past, you have heard, what was it? Bellkeeper, toll the bell. Thought of the past, phantoms of a world gone by, speak again their immortal tale, the Knightsbridge Mystery.
Saturday night, I killed Gardner. That's the incredible part. I killed him. It is sitting here next to me now. Sitting in his usual chair by the fireplace here at the old Knightsbridge Inn, acting as if nothing unusual had happened. How can a man be dead and alive at the same time? I remember the whole thing so clearly. It was just 2 days ago. 2 short days ago. Last Saturday, to be exact. Gardner's a landowner and had just collected his rents. The banks were closed, so he hid the money in his room here, and his room is next to mine. And it was all so easy. It was raining that day. Yes, it was raining hard enough to drown out the screams of a man being murdered. Gardner, Professor Nelson, and myself were sitting around the fire, just as we're sitting now. And I needed money. Needed it desperately. Not for myself, I don't count anymore, but for my son, my boy Jack. He's 21, and a man needs money to keep his son in college. I'd done everything I could think of to raise that money. I'd even worn various disguises, wigs and makeup, and sat on the steps of the bank in London to beg for farthings. Imagine it. Me, Captain Cowan, being a beggar on the streets. And Gardner was rich, fat, rich, and alone. Nobody would miss him. That is, nobody but his fat, sleek cat. And I had my son, my boy, Jack. I remember everything that happened that Saturday night. The 3 of us, Gardner, Professor Nelson, and myself, were sitting around the fireplace, and it was raining.
Nasty night, isn't it, Mr. Gardner?
Yes, quite nasty, Professor Nelson. You know, I don't see why you scientists don't do something about the weather.
Well, many men have thought about that very thing.
Thinking. Oh, they ought to take action. Thought is idle. Action brings results. Oh, think me if I haven't coined an epigram.
Yes. They were talking about the weather, and I was thinking about killing Gardner. He had to die. That was obvious. And soon, too. But how? And who would be the scapegoat to hang for the deed? Somebody would have to be. Somebody. But who?
I couldn't have managed to go downtown in this rain even if the banks had been open today, blast it. Oh, it's confounded uncomfortable keeping large sums of money about you because of a conspiracy between the weather and the Bank of England.
Well, surely the money is safe enough here, Mr. Gardner.
One would think so, but you never can tell. Nothing makes a man more jumpy than keeping a large sum of money in his top bureau drawer.
Of course, there's always the danger of robbery.
Robbery, yes.
Or murder.
Murder, Captain Cowan? No. Nobody in the Gardner family has died for generations. We Gardners just don't die. Rather set against that sort of thing.
You've made up your mind to it, eh, Gardner?
Quite, Professor.
That should have been my first hint. He himself definitely said he couldn't die. Yes, he said it then, but I thought he was joking. Nobody ever knew whether he was joking or not. He had a dry, soft way of joking, but I didn't realize that then. I just sat there when the door opened and the chambermaid came in to tidy up. I was hoping that everybody would remain quiet so I could think the whole thing out. But she came toward us and...
Anything I can do for you before I retire for the night, Professor Nelson?
No, nothing, Barbara, nothing.
Mr. Gardner?
No, thanks. Girl, get your rest.
You, Captain Cowan?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I've got to get on to London tonight.
Tonight, Captain, in this weather?
Yes, Mr. Gardner, important business. So if it's not too much trouble, Barbara, you might tell the hostler, Mr. Cox, to saddle my horse.
I ain't going down to the stables to see Mr. Cox, Captain. He ain't a man, Dan Cox ain't. He's a beast, he is.
Come, Barbara. Poor Dan Cox is no beast. He's an unfortunate victim of an accident, which has reduced his mentality to that of a small child.
Child, is it, Professor? He's an idiot. He'll murder a human someday, he will.
Oh, it's not that bad, Barbara.
Why, you're the last person I'd expect to speak decent of him, Captain. He don't like you. He says he remembers you from somewhere.
He don't remember, though. And I says to him, not to talk about a fine gentleman like you, I says.
Now, there ought to be a hospital for the mentally unsound. Not only for idiots like poor Dan Cox, but for men whose minds are warped and twisted. And those people may be completely harmless, but they need medical care.
Do you think so, Professor?
I'm sure of it. I've conducted many interesting psychological experiments on the subject, Captain. I've even known men who think they've committed a crime.
Is there anything else, gentlemen?
No, thank you, Barbara.
Good night, Barbara.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, Barbara.
You interest me, Professor.
It's a fascinating subject, Cowan. There was a man once who thought he had murdered his wife and 2 children. He went to the station house, confessed the murder, and then killed himself.
And he hadn't committed the crime at all?
No, not at all. No, not at all.
Well, gentlemen, you must excuse me. If I'm going to get to London tonight, I must be off. Good night, gentlemen.
Good night, Cowan.
I shut the door behind me very casually, just as if I really were going to London. I walked to the stable through the heavy rain. You see how clever I was? And they thought I was going to London, and they didn't even suspect that Gardner was going to die. The dark, rainy night was perfect for the murder, and Daniel Cox appeared to me to be a likely victim for the law. He was an idiot, a poor fool who would be completely helpless in my hands, and the townspeople would obviously believe anything against Dan Cox. I knocked on the stable door. Dan Cox! Dan Cox! Hello, Dan. I came down to visit you.
Did you?
Mind if I come in?
In here with me and the horses?
Cox, you like me, don't you?
I like everybody. Everybody I like. Me and the horses. I saw you once. Somewhere. But where, Captain? Where?
You're imagining things, Cox.
I've been looking at you, Captain Cowan, trying to remember.
I've never seen you before I came to this inn, Cox.
Didn't you now? Didn't you? I wonder whether...
I didn't come here, Cox, to argue. I came down here as a friend to ask a favor.
Favor, Captain?
You like this one, Cox. Barbara sent me down here to ask you to do her a favor.
Barbara did? Barbara? Pretty Barbara.
Yes, she is, Cox. And she likes you. She told me that she wouldn't trade all the fine gentlemen at the inn for you.
For me? Nobody likes me.
Why, you misjudge yourself, Dan Cox. She asked me to get her a lock of your hair and a piece of your coat as a going-away gift.
Is Barbara going away?
Yes, day after tomorrow. She's leaving the inn for good.
A lock of my hair and a piece of my coat.
I know. Women are funny. Hard to tell what they're thinking. Well, will you give it to me?
Are you lying, are you?
Here, take my pocket knife. Here, you can snip it off yourself.
Thank you, Captain. Thank you. Here's your claws in the air. Nobody ever liked me before. Just my horses.
Thank you, Cox.
Why do you look at me like that, Captain?
I was thinking what a lucky man you are, Cox. Oh, will you bridle my horse before you turn in for the night? I'll be leaving for London shortly.
Yes, sir. I'll bridle Queenie right away.
I walked back to the inn to say goodbye in case anyone was around. I had thought the whole plan out so carefully. Now I had evidence. The kind of evidence police officers look for. A piece of Cox's coat was to be found on the edge of Gardner's bed, and the lock of Cox's hair in the dead man's hand. That's circumstantial evidence. The plan was working perfectly. I walked briskly to the door, opened it, and Professor Nelson was sitting by the fire looking into the flames. When I walked in, he started suddenly.
Haven't you left for London yet, Captain Cowan?
Not yet, Professor. Where's Mr. Gardner?
Oh, he took his cat with him and went up to bed. He was tired. Won't you join me by the fire?
Some other time, Professor. But tonight I'd better start if I'm ever going to get there.
Oh, yes, indeed, yes. Oh, midnight. Oh, I must be tired. My reflexes work by the clock, sir. Definitely by the clock. I think I'd better retire myself. Oh, well, Captain, pleasant journey. Good night.
Good night.
Oh, why don't you sleep here and wait till tomorrow, sir? Traveling's difficult in this weather.
Sorry, I've important business in London, Professor.
I stood in the living room, watching the old scholar slowly climb the stairs. He walked slowly, refusing to be hurried. And then I heard his door open and close. And I knew he was in his room. Then I waited for a short time and started to creep up the stairs to my room. I had to prepare my makeup for the change from the genius Cowan to the idiot Cox. Gardner had to die. In less than a half hour, I had completed the transition. I stood in front of the mirror looking at myself. I'd done a good job. That I knew. The disguise was perfect. I was no longer Cowan. I was Cox, battered, bulbous nose, and a raggedy coat and dagger. I crept slowly to my window and opened it, planning every move, and I was clever. So very clever. Then I crept carefully out on the ledge. Gardner's window was open and barely 4 feet away. I moved slowly over the ledge like a cat in the night, step by step. The panel was slippery from the rain, and the night was dark. Dark. I could hear Gardner's heavy breathing as I crept through his window to his room. He was asleep. And there was no moon in the sky this night to give me away. I walked slowly to his bedside, dagger upraised, and then... the cat. I'd almost forgotten his fat, sleek cat. Oh, I'd forgotten that mewing, spewing cat. But I was clever. I worked faster. Right to Gardner's bedside, and then I plunged dagger. And the knife... God! The knife went in deeply. And I remember his last breath. It was like the sound of a dying fire or the moaning of the wind, a futile gasping, and then he was dead. Dead. You see, I did kill him. I remember every single detail, and I was so clever. So very clever. I remember my cleverness. I killed him. And yet he's alive. Gardner's alive. Sitting here, next to me. Gardner was dead. I stood by his bedside and pulled the knife out of his heart. I placed a piece of Cox's coat on the edge of the bedside and a piece of his hair in the dead man's hand. Then ruffled up the bedclothes and started my search of the room. I opened the drawers, the closets. Every single hiding place possible was combed for the money. I heard footsteps outside the door.
Did I hear somebody scream out? Is anything wrong? Funny, I thought I heard.
I had to work quickly, get the money. Then I remembered Gardner had said it was in the top bureau drawer in the corner. Yes, in the top bureau drawer. And there it was. A knock on the door disturbed me.
Mr. Gardner, did you call call me?
I didn't know what to do, answer and pretend I was Gardner. That seemed logical and clever. I strained my voice and called out.
Oh, yes, Barbara. What do you want now, girl?
I heard someone scream, and I thought that Beast Cox was in your room, Mr. Gardner.
No, everything's all right. Good night, girl.
Good night, sir.
I had to get out of there as soon as possible. Back to my room. Out of the window, over the ledge. It had stopped raining. And the moon was coming out. A bright, full moon. It outlined my shadow on the ledge. Then I remembered my own cleverness. If I was seen, they wouldn't see me. They'd see Cox, the half-wit Cox. I climbed in my window, clutching the money. I thought for a moment I'd seen someone on the lawn watching me. Once in my room, I removed my makeup and prepared to leave. With one clean stroke, the murdering Cox had disappeared. I was Cowan again. I opened the door to the hall. Crept down the hall to the stairs. I noticed a candle burning in the parlor. The chambermaid was standing there in a pool of light, talking to Nelson. That was a hitch in my plans.
Professor, I tell you, I heard someone scream out. If you're half the man you claim to be, Professor, you'd go down to that stable and find out what Dan Cox is up to. It ain't no good, I'll tell you that.
Go back to bed, Barbara. Whatever Cox is up to, it can't be very dangerous. Go to bed, my dear. Good night.
Good night, sir.
Nelson started up the stairs. I had to hide, but where? The stairway was dark. I pressed myself against the wall into the shadows. Nelson came closer and closer. He was close enough to touch me. I could only pray he wouldn't look my way when he turned on the landing.
There's somebody up here. That silly woman is getting me all aflutter.
Then he continued on upstairs. The girl stood in the middle of the parlor, and I was trapped. My heart beat wildly. I crept on down the stairs to listen.
Who is it? Who is it?
Barbara.
Oh.
Pretty, pretty Barbara. You understand me, you do. You can help me.
What are you doing at the inn, Dan Cox? Go on, get back to the stable.
You like me, don't you?
No.
I had to see somebody that likes me. Yes, I had to, 'cause I...
Get away from me. Get away from me, Cox.
I ain't going to hurt you. Not hurt pretty Barbara.
Let go of my arm. Let go, Cox.
Barbara, pretty Barbara. I ain't two people, am I? I ain't two people.
Beast, you ape.
I saw myself standing on the ledge tonight, and I know myself by my nose in my hand.
Let me go,
It was
Cox.
me, standing on the ledge, looking down at me, standing on the grass near the end. Two people. They both can't be me. I'm not one. I'm two, yes. And it don't make sense.
Let me go. Cox, let me. Take your hands off my
You're
throat.
pretty, Barbara, pretty.
Oh.
Barbara. Barbara. Gage. I must be dreaming. That's it. Dreaming. I'll go back to the stable and go to sleep. And when I wake up, this won't have happened. I've been dreaming all along. Else, how could I be sitting on the ledge looking down at me, sitting on the grass? I'll go back to the stable and wake up.
The idiot had fallen into my trap, and I was pleased, so pleased. I moved very carefully, very slowly, creeping to the parlor, and I stopped. I looked at the still body of the girl, at the death-like quality of her face, and knew Cox would hang for a double murder. Yes, a double murder. That was fortunate for me. I opened the door, and the moon shone fully upon me. I hurried across the gravel path to the stable. My only thought was to get to London, to get to my boy, to my son, to Jack. I knocked on the door and called, "Cox! Dan Cox!"
You I look asleep, Captain?
You look as if you might have been sleeping, Cox. Come, man, where's my horse?
Your horse? What horse?
Queenie. Is Queenie saddled?
I must be dreaming. I am asleep, ain't I, Captain? Because if I was awake, I couldn't be on the ledge and on the grass at the same time.
Do I have to get my horse myself, Cox?
I killed a woman, Captain. I killed her. Why am I two people? I killed her, and it's your fault, Captain. It's all your fault. I hate you. I hate you.
What are you talking about, Cox?
You don't know, do you? No, you don't know. You told me she liked me. You said she wouldn't trade me for all the fine gentlemen in the inn. You said, and you lied. Because she hates me.
Are you insane, Cox? Do you think anyone would believe that story, the story of an idiot?
Idiot? I'm not an idiot. I had an accident a long time ago. A funny accident. And sometimes I can't remember. Sometimes I...
Stop it, Cox, and get my horse for me.
Sometimes I can remember clear. Like sometimes I can remember who you are. And then again I can't. And you made me kill her. And it's all your fault.
Fool, I'll teach you a lesson you'll never forget. Get out of my way! Oh, I'll saddle my horse myself. I rode off, leaving Cox sobbing like a baby in the corner. I went to London to my son. I paid his bills, gave him his allowance for the year, and hid the rest of the money on my person. And then, this morning, I returned to the inn and found these men sitting here at the old Knight's Bridge Inn, chatting gaily. Barbara was serving them tea as if nothing had happened. Nelson and Gardner asked me to join them by the fire. I sat down here, puzzled and confused. I know I killed him. I saw him die. And they started to talk. They've been talking for a half an hour like this, and I can't stand it anymore, just sitting here waiting.
Well, what's the matter with you anyway, Captain Cowan? You've been quiet as can be ever since you came back from London.
Yes, hasn't he? Amazing, isn't it?
I took a trip to London myself Monday morning, but I didn't come back in a sad mood. London cheered me. Yes, I had got rid of that confounded pack of money I was carrying around. It had me blasted nervous.
I can well imagine it did, Mr. Gardner. I hear you're in for congratulations, Captain Cowan.
Congratulations.
Yes, we heard you'd won a packet of money in the Irish sweepstakes, almost £500.
I didn't win money in the sweepstakes. I didn't.
Oh, nonsense, Captain. Don't try to keep that from us.
What are you trying to do to me? Drive me crazy? Drive me insane? I didn't win money in the sweepstakes. You're supposed to be dead, Gardner. Dead. You understand? I went to a lot of trouble to kill you. Yes, and I killed you with my own hands. And stole the money. And Barbara was dead, too. Cox killed her. You've got to believe me. I disguised myself to look like Cox, and I killed Gardner. Yes, I killed him. You're dead, Gardner. And the dead can't rise from the grave. They can't. They can't. Answer me. Don't stand there looking at me. Answer me. Professor! Professor, tell me the truth.
Yes, Captain Cowan, I'll tell you the truth. Barbara was not killed that night. She was merely frightened and fainted. But you murdered Mr. Gardner by your own confession. You'd planned a perfect crime. A crime so perfect that Cox might have hung for Gardner's death if it hadn't been my little experiment.
Experiment? What experiment?
A psychological experiment, Captain. You see, I looked up your record and found out that you were an old vaudeville actor and specialized in character parts. That's where Cox remembered you from. You were on the stage the day he had his accident. So I played your own trick back on you. The only way we could get you to admit your crime was to bring Gardner back to life. This gentleman is not Mr. Gardner. He's just an actor, cleverer at makeup than you ever were. No, Captain Cowan, I wouldn't try to escape. Your confession has been taken down, and the inn is surrounded by the police.
From the time-worn pages of the past, we have recalled the Knightsbridge mystery. Bellkeeper, toll the bell.